The GOP renews its war against Black America, and they are recruiting black men to help out. Stay tuned. Today we're talking about that war, and we're talking about African American men as it relates to that war. It's going to be exciting. Stay with us. Hello, everybody. This is Attorney Augustus Corbett, a.k.a. the Minister of Justice, and with me I have
Attorney Chloe Corbett, a.k.a. the Duchess of Justice.
And together we are the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every Saturday we bring you a legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to educate, to empower, to energize the African American community for the fight that's ahead. So if you're not a subscriber, you should be. This is the place to be. This is the place, again, to get educated, to get empowered, to get energized. So go, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment, engage, get in here with us because, listen, we are up against a formidable foe. And today we're going to talk about it. All right, before we do, Chloe, how you doing? How you doing, sweetheart?
I'm doing very, very well. Happy Saturday to everyone out there. How are you doing, Dad?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Are you on your mic? It sounds like you might be on your computer mic.
Yes, I'm on my Rodecaster mic.
Now you are. Something you just did, but now it sounds the way it's supposed to sound. All right, very good. So you're looking good?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Got
it
you
from
feeling
you all.
good?
I feel great.
Got it from your mom.
It's busy.
Got it from your mom.
True. Got it from Mama. Everyone tells me that I am her twin. I'm feeling great. It's a busy week. Got a lot coming up professionally, personally, but I'm excited to do this show today.
Yes. Yeah, we have a big trial coming up on Wednesday. So, we've been preparing for that. You all, listen, we're real lawyers, okay? I mean, we are real attorneys. We're in the courthouse every day. We had a pretty big hearing yesterday, right? And we got another trial coming up, Wednesday? And then we got another trial coming up in May, and I think another one is set for June. So, yeah, we are really doing the work. So this is really a labor of love, right, Chloe? Because we could right now be preparing for this trial, but we just know how important it is to educate, to empower, and to energize the African-American community.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's something that we look forward to, and just having these conversations, empowering people, giving people knowledge, putting out content. We enjoy that. All that professionally in the midst of I'm moving as well. So, it's a lot going on, but I'm very happy to be here too.
Yeah, that moving piece, man. I hate moving.
I hate moving so much.
Yeah, I hate moving. But long as you're moving on up, like the Jeffersons used to say.
Amen.
All right, so we're going to get into this. The first story that we're going to look at today is Greg Abbott, the governor of the great state of Texas, is contemplating doing something that I find despicable and dangerous. And that is, he is chomping at the bits to pardon a convicted murderer who is also an admitted racist. I find this very, very, very troubling. As we get into this story, you all will see why We'll see why we find this so very troubling. Chloe, what are your just sort of general remarks about this upcoming story?
I mean, it's extremely troubling. It puts a focus on how political our current legal system is. Um, you know, it puts a spotlight on racism. Anytime race is at play, you know that at least here in the state of Texas, it's going to be a direct attack on the black community, which it is. And it's just unprecedented. We're going to be talking about how Greg Abbott has indicated that he would pardon a convicted murderer and former police officer, which has almost never happened. Over the past few years, there have been various calls to pardon people who claim to be wrongfully convicted, especially black people. Abbott would not listen to that, but because this is a former police officer against a BLM protester, now he's putting it on the table. So we'll get into it more, but it's unprecedented.
And let's say it, a former white police officer. Let's just be real blunt about it. A former white police officer for murdering. He's been convicted of that, of murdering a Black Lives Matter activist. All right, so let's get into this story. It is, again, despicable and dangerous. It's dangerous because Greg Abbott is sending a message to vigilantes like Daniel Perry to go out and kill Black Lives Matter or any protesters. Go and kill them, and I will pardon you. Okay, essentially, it's the same thing that Donald Trump said. He said, hey, go to my rallies, go out there, do my bidding, and I got your back. I'll pay for your legal fees. I'll pardon you, and so forth. And that is dangerous because these, like Kyle Rittenhouse, they know they can go kill people, go murder people, and know that the government is going to violate the rule of law to protect them, to pardon them. And so it puts a bullseye on the chest and back and head of African-American people, especially those who are out here protesting racism. So let's get into this story. There's so much to this story. So yes, as we've said several times, Greg Abbott has indicated before this man was even sentenced, indicated that he wanted to pardon this man. And Chloe, let's say that the reason he wants to do it is because he's a white supremacist. I'll just say that, number one. And number two, he is getting pressure from other white supremacists who want this man pardoned. And so Greg Abbott, basically for political reasons and because of his own personal racism, he is doing something that is an attack on the rule of law, basically. So let's talk about what happened in this case.
Yeah, so Daniel Perry was an off-duty police officer here in Central Texas. And the victim, Foster, was a protester, a white man who was protesting on behalf of Black Lives Matter in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. So Foster, the victim, he attended a protest in Austin on July 25th, 2020. If you remember 2020, we were in the very, very beginning stages of the pandemic. George Floyd had just been murdered. People were protesting. People were upset. So Mr. Foster, he attended a protest. According to police, Daniel Perry was off duty and was driving for Uber. And after Perry stopped his car, he honked at people who were protesting while they were walking through the streets in Austin, Texas, which is the capital of Texas. Seconds later, according to the police and witnesses, Sergeant Perry drove his car into the crowd. After which, there was some type of confrontation with Foster, who reportedly had an AK-47, which is perfectly legal here in Texas. Foster, he was a 28-year-old white man and an Air Force veteran. He had been seen openly carrying an AK-47 rifle at the time, which is legal, as I said. Then there are conflicting reports um, about what happened next. So Daniel Perry is saying that Foster. Can you go back to the other screen? Foster raised his rifle to Daniel Perry first. Daniel Perry is saying that no, excuse me. Perry is saying that Foster raised his rifle. Witnesses are saying that Foster, the victim, never raised his rifle, but Perry, drove through the crowd. But seconds later, Mr. Foster was shot and killed, and then Perry fled the area. So those are the basic facts. And unfortunately, a 28-year-old young man lost his life in that encounter. And there has been a lot of debate, which was brought up in the trial as well, about Texas's stand your ground law, about the Second Amendment, etc. So these are the basic facts, Dad. And what are your thoughts about it?
Again, I find it reprehensible, and I also find the young man who was killed murdered, and he was convicted of this. I'm not saying, I don't have to say alleged. A jury, a 12-panel jury found him, a 12-member jury found him guilty of murder. That means that the jury heard all the evidence in the case. They sat and listened intently. They deliberated for 17 hours and returned a guilty verdict, saying essentially that Mr. Perry killed Garrett Foster with malice. It was not self-defense. They heard all that Mr. Perry had to say in his lawyers, and he had great lawyers. I mean, he had very good lawyers. The jury rejected their theory of the case and found him guilty of first-degree murder. And they didn't hear everything that Daniel Perry had said prior to shooting and killing Garrett Foster. We're going to show you some of the things that he said on social media, which completely undermines his self-defense claim.
And what he was posting on social media is just horrible.
Yes, it is. Okay, so let me get back on the screen. So the Texas Tribune is saying that Greg Abbott directed the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole to consider recommending a pardon for Daniel Perry on Saturday, one day after Travis County jury convicted the U.S. Army sergeant in the 2020 murder of Austin protester Garrett Foster. Here in the state of Texas, unlike many states, the governor cannot pardon someone unless he gets a recommendation from the Texas Board of Pardon and Paroles to do so. He has to wait on that. So the pardon may not occur if they don't recommend a pardon, okay? So we just got to wait and see what they do. But this is quite a bit of pressure coming from the governor. So after 17 hours of deliberations and an 8-day trial, jurors Friday found Perry guilty of murder for shooting and killing Foster, who was armed with an AK-47, and as Chloe pointed out, which is perfectly legal here. We have constitutional carry here. People can buy guns here without much of anything. Just show your driver's license, go through a background check if you're buying it from a federal firearms licensee, and if you pass, you got it. You don't have to get training, register, none of that. Just buy it. So we here in AK-47, I would venture to say Most houses here have an AK-47. Perry, an Uber driver, had encountered the protest a few blocks from the Capitol in downtown Austin. Under pressure from conservatives, Abbott announced Saturday that he asked the parole board to review Perry's conviction on an expedited basis. So he's telling them to do their review quickly. And the Texas Constitution, he says, required the parole board to recommend a pardon before a governor can act. So here's a statement that Abbott released on Twitter. He tweeted this statement. He says, "I'm working as swiftly as Texas law allows regarding the pardon of Sergeant Perry." So right there, that tells you he's talking to those conservatives who are putting pressure on him. He says, Texas has one of the strongest stand-your-ground laws of self-defense that cannot be nullified by a jury or a, quote, progressive district attorney. That shows you how political this is for him. Texas Constitution limits the governor's pardon authority to only act on a recommendation by the Board of Pardons and Parole. By the way, all people that he has put in their seats. Texas law does allow the governor to request the Board of Pardons and Paroles to determine if a person should be granted a pardon. I have made that request and instructed the board to expedite its review. I look forward to approving the board's pardon recommendation as soon as it hits my desk. Additionally, I have already prioritized reining in, now watch this, show you how political this is. Additionally, I have already prioritized reining in rogue district attorneys, and the Texas legislature is working on laws to achieve that goal. This is, again, all I can say is it's just gut-wrenching to live in a state like this. We're living during a time where the GOP, that's why we named this broadcast this, the GOP is at war against blacks. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how they are recruiting black men to help them fight black people. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. So, Chloe, this is just horrendous to me. You and me as attorneys, we tell people who ask about expunctions and pardons, we tell them that is one of the hardest things in the world to get from Greg Abbott. I mean, it is virtually impossible. He does very few of those. And most of the time, I read that the ones that he granted are for minor offenses, as an act of mercy. And here he is, can't wait to pardon a convicted murderer. It's just gut-wrenching. It's an attack on the rule of law.
Yeah, and the last part of that statement stands out to me because last week we talked about fascism and what happened to those two Tennessee representatives who have been reinstated. But what stands out to me is he's working to remove quote-unquote rogue district attorneys, so progressive liberal district attorneys who were duly elected by constituents in their counties. So he's wanting to overrule the will of the people that voted those district attorneys in, as well as using the legislature to write laws to overrule the will of the people. So again, goes back to this talk of fascism that we see that the GOP and the right are using to put in place laws that hamper the black community, hamper criminal justice reform, hamper police reform, etc. Because that's basically what he's saying. He's saying, I want to, the black and brown and progressive people that vote in these district attorneys who look at criminal justice reform differently, who want to put a stop to police brutality. We're going to remove them or limit their authority by overruling the will of the people and putting laws in place that do that. And that's exactly what happened in Tennessee when the Tennessee state legislature, did that move where, apparently the two representatives violated the rules of decorum and removed them from the legislature. It's just another notch in the GOP strategy, moving us closer and closer to fascism, which is overruling, the will of the people. These elected officials, these district attorneys were elected typically in their state, in their counties, and they're implementing, policies that the people wanted because they voted them in, as well as writing laws to do that as well. So it's demoralizing as well as attorneys because we take an oath to uphold the Constitution and work within the rule of law, and defend our clients who are subject to to the laws by legislatures. And there's so many clients where there's so many times with our criminal clients where we lean on the mercy of prosecutors or the judges and don't get any. But when it's political, when it's a white police officer, you can go to the highest elected official in our state and get a pardon for a convicted murderer. So it's just it's heartbreaking. It truly is.
Well said. I think that really puts in perspective what we feel as attorneys hearing this, because we work in the system and we know how difficult it is to get justice for especially African American and Latino people. It is very hard. Bryant Stevenson, the founder and director of the Equal Justice Initiative, says it's easier to get justice in America for a white man who's guilty than for a poor black person who is not guilty. That is true. And so for Greg Abbott, for these folks to have such majority control in this state and other states, that they're doing just openly racist, openly bigoted things, it's just amazing and gut-wrenching. I mean, gut-wrenching. And it's why we spent time last week talking about the importance of black people voting, the critical urgency of African Americans voting, especially, yes, in national elections, but especially in statewide elections, because that's where the GOP is focused. They're focused on statewide elections. And we got to match, even exceed their energy on the state level. Otherwise, man, they're going to continue to do this stuff and not really even care. They don't even care. Donald Trump has them so gassed up, Chloe, they don't even care that they're openly doing racist white supremacy things that really is an attack on our democracy, if we want to be straight up about it. It's an attack. These things are attacks on our democracy, and they don't even care. So
And
let me
they
put
know,
up – go ahead.
I was just gonna say they know exactly what they're doing. And in Abbott's case, he's a former Supreme Court justice, which is the highest court in Texas on the state level. He served multiple terms as attorney general. He knows the law. He knows exactly, what governs the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. He knows exactly what he's doing, but because of racist and political motivations, he is, I want to say, he's showing that we're really not a nation based on the rule of law. We're a nation based on the rule of people, and more specifically white men.
Exactly. This is a white male hegemony, and they're trying to keep it that way. I mean, bottom line. Now, I want to go back to the screen here for a second, because the murdered victim, Garrett Foster, is a hero. He is a hero. He died fighting for the rights of African Americans. He was murdered at a Black Lives Matter peaceful protest. And for that, he was murdered. Cold, flat out murdered. You briefly went through the facts, Chloe, and some of Daniel Perry's supporters said that Mr. Foster raised his AK-47, but multiple people disputed that. And the jury heard all of it and said, no, he did not. And I think we got a slide here prepared in just a moment on the stand your ground law and why it should not have applied in this situation. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But I just wanted to recognize Garrett Foster because, like with back in the 60s, you had Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two young Jewish people who were murdered as they stood up for African Americans. And I just wanted to bring attention and to honor this young man who gave his life. His fiance there in the picture. What else stands out about him, Chloe, is he too, by the way, is a former military veteran. But I heard a little bit of their love story, and from what I understand, in high school she lost her legs. She became an amputee, and they were dating back then. And he stayed with her. Even after she lost her legs, he stayed with her and continued to love her right until her death, she said. I heard her say that recently. So, again, we talk a lot about racism. We talk a lot about white supremacy, but not all white people are racist. Not all white people are white supremacists. And when we have those who stand with us, even to the point of giving their life, we should honor them. And I honor this man. I honor him for actually giving his life in service of African American people and to make this a better country, unlike Daniel Perry, who is a racist murderer.
And what is so extraordinary too, Dad, and I honor Garrett Foster as well, and my heart goes out to his fiance and his entire family. But also, what's so extraordinary about this pardon proposal is that Daniel Perry has not even been sentenced yet. Here in Texas, there's two phases to trial. There's the guilt innocence phase. He's already been found guilty. He's a convicted murderer. And then there's the second phase, which is the sentencing phase, on which the judge out of Travis County will determine what his sentence is, typically after a hearing. And because he's facing 5 to 99 years in life. So typically, you wouldn't even get on the topic of appeal until the person is found guilty, the person is sentenced. Then it goes to the appeals process. They can file a motion for new trial, which is where they ask the judge, the district trial level judge, to look back at the evidence again, or they can appeal it up to a higher level appellate court. None of that has happened. The next day, the following day, after the jury found Daniel Perry guilty of murder, Abbott comes out and tweets that he puts pressure on the board of appointed members who he appointed to send a pardon request or proposal over to him. So it's just extraordinary. I mean, this is something that you would hear out of, some other type of anti-democratic country that, maybe in Eastern Europe or some other country, not the United States of America, that is supposed to be based on democratic principles, the rule of law, the U.S. Constitution, all of that. We're not an autocratic society, but we are moving closer and closer and closer to it, just like we detailed last week about fascism and what to look for. So, I mean, it's just extraordinary on that level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at a few of the text messages that Daniel Perry sent out before he actually murdered Garrett Foster. So a Travis County State District judge has unsealed court records that reveal more anti-protester social media posts and racist messages that the jury did not see or hear while deciding whether to convict Daniel Perry on a murder charge in the death of protester Garrett Foster. So let's stop there and talk about that just a second, because quite often when someone has a criminal trial and there's a hearing or there's a trial, the rules of evidence will not allow the state to introduce evidence into the person's trial that would go to the person's character or involves some sort of extraneous offense, because of the concern that such evidence is not relevant to, the murder or to the charge the person is facing, or that it may prejudice the jury. So the judge wisely, as the gatekeeper, kept that evidence from the jury. I presume he let maybe some of it in, but a lot of it he did not. So the jury didn't even hear what we're about to read that Daniel Perry tweeted or posted on Facebook, which completely undercuts his self-defense argument, totally. And so let's look at some of that. Chloe, you want to add to that?
And another reason too why typically text messages or other types of documents are left out is because it's hearsay. And the prosecutor or the person trying to get the text messages in will have to show that, well, no, judge, is not hearsay. There's some type of exception. Now, in Daniel Perry's case, maybe it could have come in because there's an exception to hearsay that says, if the person who sent the text message is one of the parties or the defendant in this case, then what he or she says is an admission, and admissions by party opponents can come in as a hearsay exception. The judge must not have bought that argument from the prosecutors to keep a lot of these text messages out. But there's a whole host of things that we have to look at under the Texas Rules of Evidence or federal rules of evidence to try to get documents to come into play in this case. But the fact that the jury did not see most of these incriminating racist statements and still convicted Perry shows how strong they felt the evidence must have been, and they must have put credibility on the witnesses that testified as well.
Exactly. To me, it enhances the credibility of this jury verdict. I mean, it really shows that they were not being prejudiced by things like these tweets and Facebook posts, that they looked at the evidence that the judge allowed in, and they found this man to be a murderer. And why the governor is going to pardon this man, it is mind-blowing. It is boggling to the mind, especially for those of us who work in this system. And every African-American should be alarmed by this because, again, it is an attack on the rule of law. It really is. It is an attack on our democracy. You mentioned, Chloe, a second ago, the First Amendment. Mr. Foster was out there exercising his First Amendment right to protest. All right? He was well within his right to protest. That's the First Amendment. He was well within his right under the Second Amendment to have the AK-47. He was not violating any laws. He was just out there as a decent human being, standing up on behalf of African-American people. And for that, he was murdered. And the governor is going to pardon his murderer. It is mind-blowing. I hopefully after I don't know if Abbott knew about these tweets and Facebook posts before he said this. Hopefully he didn't. And hopefully now, learning about them, if he didn't, he will change his mind and come to his senses.
I doubt that.
I doubt it too.
I no, he is wholly political. And you know why it's so political and racist to that? I saw that Rittenhouse tweeted out about this case asking Abbott to pardon Daniel Perry. Rittenhouse was I think it was 17 at the time. He had some type of firearm, semi-automatic rifle. He killed a person, and he was found not guilty. The facts are nearly similar. It's just that one was a white man who was protesting and an ally of black people, and the other was a white man who was against BLM and perhaps against black people as well. I don't know him. But it just shows how political it is when it's
Who?
very
Kyle
similar
Rittenhouse?
circumstances. Kyle
Is
Rittenhouse, yes.
Was he? I mean, are you unsure about whether he was against BLM too?
I mean, I don't know him personally to say, whether or not he's against black people, but I can definitely say that he's not with BLM
Okay,
like Garrett
sure.
Foster was.
Yeah,
So I don't I don't want to get a defamation claim or anything, but I'm
sure.
just saying um it's very parallel situations. One is just on the side of standing with black people, and one was either neutral or against us.
Yes. All right. Let's look at some of these awful, horrendous tweets. So first, Daniel Perry is quoted as saying he called the protesters, anarchists, agitators, looters, or lowlifes. Okay, people out, as you pointed out, who were protesting about 2 months after George Floyd's murder. So these are not anarchists, agitators, looters. These are people who are out fighting for justice, because we saw George Floyd get lynched on camera. So no, these are not lowlifes. These are Americans who are exercising their First Amendment right to protest. And the overwhelming majority of those protests were peaceful. And there was nothing about the protests in this particular case that suggested that it was anything but peaceful. Okay? Protests are, by their very nature, messy, and they disturb things. That's what they're intended to do. That doesn't make them lowlifes and anarchists and etc. All right, he goes on to say Black Lives Matter is racist to white people. It is and you got to especially hear this one. He says, it is official. I am racist. It is official. I am racist. Why? Because I do not agree with people acting like monkeys. Calling black folks and those who protest on behalf of black folks monkeys. How much more racist can someone be? It is official. I am racist because I don't like people who act like monkeys. And Greg Abbott's going to pardon this person. It's unbelievable. Now it is my turn to get banned from Facebook by comparing the Black Lives Matter movement to a zoo full of monkeys that are freaking out, flinging their expletive. Very racist human being right here. My parents own a 4-bedroom house, and the BLM movement believes that my parents should give their house to a poor black family and pretty much live in a 1-bedroom house that they should buy with money they don't have. Who says anything about that? BLM, Black Lives Matter.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
He's ignorant too, as we say in the black community. Not only is he racist, but he's ignorant. Straight up ignorant. Doesn't know what he's talking about, making absolutely no sense. And this is who Abbott wants to align himself with and use his pardon powers with. This ignorant fool. Like, come on, sir. Come on.
Yes.
Who says that?
Yes.
Who says? I mean, it's ugh.
He says Black Lives Matter is the result of victim mentality. Black Lives Matter is the result of victim mentality. Let me say this about Black Lives Matter, and I want the camera on me. when I say this. Black Lives Matter, the movement, first of all, the phrase is absolutely true. You shouldn't even have to say it, but you do today. The movement, while I may not agree with everything the movement has said in all its positions, I embrace the Black Lives Matter movement because it has brought attention to a very serious problem that has gone on in this nation for 4 centuries, and that is the murder, the vicious murder, oftentimes lynching of black bodies with impunity. And the Black Lives Matter movement brought attention to that. And as a result of that horrendous legacy of murdering black people as if we are not even as valuable as animals, as dogs and cats, as a result of the BLM movement, we're finally seeing some level in certain jurisdictions of some justice. For example, here in the Dallas area, just a couple of weeks ago, Chloe, you attended a little bit of the trial of the officer who murdered Jordan Peterson, a young African-American kid. This officer shot him to death. He was convicted in state court and had a huge civil trial in federal court where a federal jury awarded Jordan Peterson's family lots of money for Jordan Edwards, pardon me. Yes, Jordan Edwards. I think the officer's name was Peterson, right?
Oliver, I think.
Oliver. Okay, yes, very
Roy
good.
Oliver. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Roy Oliver, very good. So the Black Lives Matter movement has brought attention to this issue. As imperfect as it has done at times, as messy again as it has been, as uncomfortable as it has made this country, still we're seeing a lot more attention brought to an issue that has just gone on unnoticed for many years. And again, that is the murder of black bodies in this country. Here in our area, we have seen over the past few years 3 or so police officers held accountable for murdering black people. 3 or so. Botham Jean, Jordan Edwards. There's one was
Tatiana.
There's a Tatiana Jefferson, very good. There was another one over in the Frisco area, somewhere in the northern Dallas area, and around the country, we are seeing more justice as a result of the BLM movement. So, no matter what they say, because they take our words, critical race theory, woke, Black Lives Matter, and they demonize those words. And oftentimes even black people start demonizing words and phrases and movements intended to help them. But they start repeating these white supremacist talking points against their own interests. All right? So, couple more, because there are many. Daniel Perry says, this racist says, if this symbol represents racism in America, shows Confederate flag, so do these shows the NAACP logo, Hispanic Scholarship Fund, American Association for Affirmative Action, BET, UNCP, the Democratic Party logo, etc. So he says, if the Confederate flag is racist, then so is the NAACP, so is the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, so is the American Association for Affirmative Action, BET. Anything, in other words, that is out here trying to give African Americans or Latino Americans a voice or express their views or racial justice, equity, anything that does that, he says that's racist. Whereas the Confederate flag is a symbol of actual terrorism and tyranny against black people. The NAACP ain't killed no one, hasn't murdered anyone under their banner, and all the rest of those organizations. This man is sick. This man is sick. And you said it so well, Chloe. Greg Abbott is going to attach the governor's office with this? Forget his personal beliefs. But are you going to attach the governor's office with this? Do you mean to tell me the governorship of the great state of Texas, the biggest state, one of the biggest states in the country, if not the biggest, you're going to attach the prestige of the governor's office with this vile, despicable human being? If so, we are back to Confederate days. We're back to George Wallace. We're back to Lester Maddox. We're back officially.
I think we never left. And you, at the end, you said what I was thinking, that Texas was a Confederate state. Texas seceded from the United States of America. Texas did what it did with Mexico. Texas had slaves. This is who Texas is. The Texas government is showing itself. It's showing out, as we say. Abbott is showing out. And, for a long time, these open races remained hidden. But now they are feeling more free and more free to come out and show out. Just like what Daniel Perry's doing with his tweets and his texts. They're coming out, they're showing out, they're feeling emboldened. They're coming out from hibernation. And why are they coming back out? Because the history of racism and violence in this country was never adequately addressed. Yes, we had a bloody civil war. Yes, we had the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery in name only. It didn't completely abolish slavery. That's one area. That's one thing that we need to continually point out. But we have not done what we talked about last year in a previous video, which is had reparations, reformation, and all of that. And we have not eradicated this evil spirit of racism in this country. We allowed it to bury underneath American soil, but we haven't eradicated it. So now they're coming back up. The stench of racism is coming back up, and they're feeling more emboldened to do so.
Well, I'm going to say what you said. That spirit never did go away. It's been here the whole time. I would argue that Donald Trump just emboldened it and basically said, come out from behind your trees and come out from under your rocks, racist, white supremacists, and be proud to be a white supremacist. Be proud to be a racist. We conquered this land. We conquered the natives. We conquered the black man. So be proud of that. Don't back up from that, because if you continue being sympathetic or soft or whatever you want to call it, they're gonna take over this country. And that is the white fear that we're actually dealing with. As even more than Donald Trump, you know who really set this in motion? Well, like you said, it's always been in motion. But who sort of relit the fire? Barack Obama.
Yeah.
When Obama got elected and reelected, that sent a message to white Americans. Wow. A black man president? Wow. And now a black female vice president? We better get mean, mad, and ugly and fight and kill and take over the Capitol building and whatever we got to do. Because and that's what Trump tells them. And so let me just bring up one more little thing here about this guy. So Donald Trump tweeted back then, he said, any protesters, anarchists, agitators, looters, or lowlifes who are going to Oklahoma, please understand you will not be treated like you have been in New York, Seattle, Minneapolis. It will be a much different scene. And to that, Daniel Perry responded, "Send them to Texas. We will show them why we say don't mess with Texas." So, like you said, Chloe, like you said, if the jury heard the evidence and rejected his self-defense claim and didn't hear all this, this should really tell everybody the jury got this 150% right. This man had murder in his heart. He wanted to kill those protesters, okay? Which brings me, Chloe, to the last slide on this before we start talking about how the GOP is recruiting black men to help in this fight. All right, so the Texas Stand Your Ground law. Texas Penal Code Section 9.31E says this: a person who has a right to be present at the location where the force is used, who has not provoked the person against whom the force is used, and who is not engaged in criminal activity at the time the force is used, is not required to retreat before using force as described by this section. This is Texas Stand Your Ground statute. I highlighted the section of this statute that I think made his self-defense stand your ground argument completely null and void, because you told us, and it's true, we got this from the Texas Tribune. We presume they had, that they had reporters in the courtroom. We haven't seen a transcript of the trial, but we presume that the Texas Tribune had reporters in the courtroom as this trial was going on, and it has been reported that Daniel Perry, while driving his Uber, turned into the crowd. Okay? The crowd was peacefully protesting. He took it upon himself to turn into the crowd with his car. That is an aggressive action. Okay? That is an extremely aggressive action. Go ahead, Mr. Perry. Continue driving your Uber. Continue picking up people, delivering people, going about your business as American citizens exercise their First Amendment and Second Amendment right to peacefully protest while carrying an AK-47. You are not Mr. Big Bad Billy Wolf here with the authority to go and mess with these people. And that's what he did. And so this red language here, let's go back to it. This red language here says, who has not provoked the person against whom the force is used. So when Mr. Perry turned his car into the protesters, he was provoking Garrett Foster and those other protesters. And the law clearly says, Chloe, you cannot provoke violence, kill someone, and then come back and say you acted in self-defense.
That's exactly what was reported. He tried to argue that Mr. Foster raised the AK-47 at him, and that is when he pulled out his handgun and shot Mr. Foster, then ran off. But as the Tribune reported, multiple witnesses disputed his version of events. And, the jury listened to those witnesses, as we said before, found them credible, because the jury is the fact finder. The jury is the one, they have the ultimate authority to look at those witnesses, see how they testify, see how they look, assess their credibility, assess the credibility of all of the evidence. And they did that in this case. And they found those version of what happened by the witnesses to be credible. So, it's funny too. A lot of the GOP says, well, we got to let juries decide. Or again, we go back to we're a nation of the rule of law. Well, under the United States Constitution, every person accused of a crime has the right to have a jury of its peers, which Daniel Perry did. And his peers found him guilty and convicted him. So it's just it's just what's infuriating too, Dad. It's just the picking and choosing of, the rights and the laws that the GOP chooses to follow.
So let me just say this, and then we're going to talk about how the GOP is recruiting black men to help in this war against black people. So Mr. Perry turned his car into the protesters. That's Act A, and that is an aggressive, provocative act. Let's say, and there is no proof that he did so, but let's say Garrett Foster in return or in response to Mr. Perry turning his car into the protesters. Let's say Mr. Foster did raise his rifle. He also had the right to stand his ground. Okay? And let's say he raised it. Let's say he did. Again, there's no proof he did. I don't believe he did. The jury didn't believe he did. But just for the sake of argument, let's say he did in response to Daniel Perry turning his car into the protesters. Then, again, Mr. Foster had the right to raise his rifle, and given whether Mr. Perry's actions were, created an imminent danger to Garrett Foster, he could have fired his rifle. Right? He didn't. But to me, he would have had the same right as Perry. And I guarantee you, had that happened, Greg Abbott would be singing a different tone today. Throw the book at him. Why?
Yep.
Because, again, this is about race. They're out there, these protesters, fighting for black lives. That does not resonate with Greg Abbott and MAGA and Trump and most white conservatives. That to them, as Daniel Perry said, Black Lives Matter to them is racist. Just merely saying Black Lives Matter. That's racism. Okay. So we'll move on. Let's talk now about how the GOP is recruiting black men. So we said in the beginning, the GOP renews its war on blacks and recruits black men to help. And here are some of those men. Ben Carson. I remember when you were a child, Chloe, we bought you both of his books, you and Caleb, so you can read about this gifted, this wonderful man. And I want to say this. I am not really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, disparaging any of these men, okay? Some of these men are Republicans and conservatives. And by the way, let me put the camera back on me a minute. Ideologically, I am right of center. Okay, just to show you, I'm not disparaging these men. I am right of center. I am a committed Christ follower. And that causes me to be at odds with many of the policies of the Democrat Party. But I'm an unusual Christ follower. I also believe strongly in racial justice. So that puts me at odds with the Republican Party. I have been a Republican. I was a Republican. And I was a Democrat. I was a Democrat, worked on the Jesse Jackson presidential campaign in 84. And then I became a Republican around 85, 86. Today, I am just completely outdone with both political parties because I believe they both mess up on various issues. So today, I'm home. I am a political independent. I am a political independent. So some of these people here are uh, conservatives and a part of the Republican Party out of a matter of conscience. I get that. I understand that. And so I will not disparage them. Okay? It's just that I see things different because I believe being a Christian also means fighting for justice. Okay? Again, as a Christian, that also means fighting for justice. Justice is throughout the Bible. So, back to these men. Ben Carson, Larry Elders, Barris Owens, Tim Scott, Clarence Thomas. I don't know this young man. He's in Congress. He's one of 2 black House of Representative members. Of course, we all know Herschel Walker. Alan West ran for governor here in the state of Texas. On the bottom, from left going to right, there is Darrell Scott, a pastor from Ohio. There is DJ Academics, young man, social media person. Chloe, you may know more about him than I do. I don't know very much about this guy.
Yeah.
Then there's Yeezy, Lil Wayne. Then, well, I guess both of these 2 guys here, Lil Wayne and Kanye, are Yeezy. Is that right?
No, one's Wheezy. Wayne is Wheezy. Kanye's Yeezy.
Okay. Shows how much I know. So Wheezy and Yeezy. Okay. Then there's Ali Alexander, who reportedly led the Stop the Steal thing that, resulted in all those folks storming the Capitol. And then I learned today that DaBaby supported Donald Trump. I don't know much about him, but he's a rapper from North Carolina. Is that right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Then there's Mark Burns, a pastor from South Carolina, and a man here that, look, I've loved over the years as a boxer. One of the most intriguing figures in America, Mike Tyson, who apparently is a strong Trump supporter. And I believe it goes back to his days where he did a lot of fights and business deals with Trump as a fighter in Trump's Atlantic City casino, the Trump casino or whatever it's called, So I think, Mike just probably has a personal friendship with Trump over the years, and so he's a Trump supporter. So these are some of the men, not all of them. There are many, 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 many black men who, unfortunately, support Trump, and the GOP is recruiting more black men. Okay? So, with that introduction on this topic, Chloe, please go ahead.
Well, this is leading, I believe, to the growing divide between black men and black women, because black women have been the bedrock of getting Democrat officials elected, and more black men are trending right. And there is a divide, a growing divide between us. If you go on forums that are for black women, by black women, you'll see things as let black men handle that. We got our own issues to handle over here, because a lot of people feel like we have supported black men. We've stood by them, but now they are abandoning black women to go to the right, go with outside of our race. I mean, there's a lot of intersectionality with it and conflating issues, but it is leading to the growing divide between us within the black community. And we've talked about how we were illegally and unjustly arrested when we were standing up for ourselves against racism at a movie theater here. And the manager that called the police was a black man who said that we were playing the race card. So, there is this growing sentiment amongst black men of this mindset. I remember also I had a conversation with a family member of ours who's a young black man, and he was for Trump, and we kind of had a back and forth about it. So I've seen it personally. We've gone through it. It's happening professionally, and there is a growing divide between men and women in the black community.
All right, very good. Let's look at some of the data. But before I do, I think you brought up something so critical, and we're going to see it in the data, and that is how committed black women are to the Democrat Party and really can't stand the GOP, but how black men have misgivings. A good percentage of black men have misgivings about the Democrat Party and are therefore open to the GOP. That is a complex discussion, very. Well, I think we got a list here of some of the reasons why we think that is the case. But here's some facts for us. So when Barack Obama ran for the presidency in 2000, what was that? 8?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when he ran, Chloe, NBC News reports that 95% of black male voters and 96% of black women chose Obama. 4 years later, when he ran for re-election, support from black women remained at 96%, but black men's support dropped to 87%. That's an 8% drop in the space of 4 years. For whatever reason, black men said, okay, I'm not going this time. We're going to look at a list of reasons why we think that happened, okay? Let's look at another election, Barack Obama, when he ran against Mitt Romney. And we're going to just see how the black male vote just continues to slip from the Democrat candidate. 4 years later, support from black women remained at 96%. Black men slid to 87%. All right. Hillary Clinton. And by that, so that's pretty consistent with what we saw there. All right. Then when Hillary ran against Donald Trump in 2016, when the nominee was Hillary, black men dropped further to 82%, while black women's support for Clinton remained high at 94%. Okay? And this recent election, 80%. So it went from 94%
96.
down to 96% for black men, down to 82% for black men.
80%.
Oh, yes, sorry. 80%, because the 82% was for Hillary. So it dropped even lower than that, 80% for Joe Biden in 2020. So the GOP sees black men as fair game. They see them as a group of people that they can exploit, manipulate. It's the way I see it. Because I don't care, be honest with you, this is me. I don't care. And I just said I'm right of center. Okay? But I'm not voting for a white supremacist. I'm not voting for a white supremacist who want to send me and my folks back to the back of the bus, who can't even fix their mouths to say Black Lives Matter, who block voting rights, who block legislation to rein in rogue police officers, who I'm not voting for those. I'm not voting. There's nothing a GOP person can say to me to get my vote for a bunch of white supremacists. No way. Forget it. Even when I was a Republican, I didn't vote for such people. That's why I am no longer a Republican. Okay? And I know the game that the GOP and white conservatives play with black conservatives. Let me tell you how I know that game, Chloe. I went to a white law school the first year of my law school. You go to law school for 3 years. First year I was at a white law school in Virginia Beach. Regent University. Fine people, the professors especially. I became friends with those. They are very conservative, white campus. And they were delighted to have a person like me, a black person who's right of center, who opposes abortion and other things. And what they wanted to do was to just basically lay out the red carpet for me, right? And with positions, with money, with all the privileges of being a black person who will be out there speaking those talking points. I said, no, that's not me. You don't know me. I'm conservative on some issues because I'm a Christian. I'm not conservative on issues because I embrace and support white supremacy. You got it twisted. What they didn't know was in college, I was a black militant, a black revolutionary. I became a Christian. But I did not lose my fire for racial justice and racial equality. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'll be teaching and preaching a message about some of this, about how some black Christians can get manipulated by white Christians to embrace, to not embrace racial justice while embracing white talking points, white supremacy talking points. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, actually. So these guys, some of these guys, like, you know, I have to be a little bit careful what we say about Justice Thomas. As attorneys, we can't disparage the bar. But it is troubling to see this week that rich, very, very wealthy, rich white people have paid for trips for him, house, and other stuff. That is troubling because those people, they focus on the U.S. Supreme Court. And to see that they have done such things for one of the court's members is troubling at a minimum. Some of these other folks are just bought and paid for. Let me just put them back on the screen here. Now, what just happened? I don't know. Let's see what just happened here. I want to go back. Go ahead, Chloe, while I look into this, see why we just had that little mess up.
Well, I'm ready to. I think it'd be interesting to talk about why black men are supporting Trump and moving over
Go ahead.
to the right.
Please, go ahead.
One thing, the first thing that we have listed up here is religion. What a lot of people may not realize who are outside of the black community is the black community overall is very religious and of the Christian faith. And the church has been the backbone of our community. The church has been the institution when the government would not step in that we turn to help us get out of situations, to help get justice for us, to, help with peaceful protesting, etc. So I want to hear your thoughts about this on religion. But what's interesting to me, Dad, is that black women are the backbone typically of the black church. So black women, we're very religious as well. And, we're in the church, all of that. So from your perspective as a black man, where do you see religion coming in to help black men or, for them to move more right or support Trump?
That is an excellent question, Chloe. That is an excellent. I wish we had a group of folks to hash that out. That is an excellent question. So let me make sure I understand. Yeah, maybe we should. I think let's plan on doing that. Some of you folks, get the word out, please, that we're gonna, because that question is so important. And let me rephrase the question, or at least express it the way I understood the way you asked it. So you're absolutely right that the black church is pretty much led by black women, right? Or at least consists of mostly black women. You go into the average church, the average black church, and most of the congregants are African-American women, no question about it. So you all could say black women, you could say black women are even more religious than black men. So if religion is a reason why black men support Trump or support GOP, why aren't more black women supportive of the GOP or Trump? Did I phrase it right in my words?
Yes. Yep.
That's a great question. Let me as a man, let me just speculate. Let me speculate. My speculation is that in addition to religion being a reason, I believe the third thing is also a huge factor, and that is a lot of black men say, well, I voted for Obama, and it really didn't help. It didn't help me as a black man. I mean, what did it do for me? How was it helpful for me to have stood in the rain, stood on my feet, took time off my job, whatever, and voted for Obama? He didn't do anything for me. He did more for the gay community. He did more for this community. He did more for that issue, that cause. He didn't do much of anything for me. So I think a lot of black men, in addition to the religion piece, would say, supporting Democrats has not been helpful or fruitful. Okay, and I disagree strongly. I'm not a Democrat, but the Democrat, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, a lot of the current day legislation, it's definitely over the last 100 years has come through the Democrat Party. Now, the Republican Party, back when it consisted of black people doing Reconstruction, especially before the Dixiecrats abandoned the Democrat Party and came over into the Republican Party. The Republican Party gave us the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, etc. So I disagree with this ignorant notion that the Democrats have done nothing for black Americans. To your specific point, black men have the obligation as sort of the leaders and heads of our families to be providers. And so a lot of times for us, things come down to pocketbook issues, right? Who can help me financially? Who can help me economically? Who can help me get a job? Who can help me keep a job? Those sorts of things. And, so I think in addition to the religion piece, some black men have just become despondent with the Democrat. And then Trump, another issue here with Trump is, specifically, Trump had a pretty decent relationship with black hip-hoppers before he ran for office. I mean, a lot of them talked about him in their rap songs. A lot of them liked him. And some of that has to do with the fact that he, lives this, he lived this playboy life, this gangster type life. That endeared him to a lot of black folks. They kind of ascribed to want to be like him, rich with a lot of women and rogue and so on. So some of the young dudes, some of the hip hop community, found him to be great material for their rap music. And so he enjoyed a great relationship with a lot of rappers. And even to this day, many like him for that reason. I read this morning, Meek Mills said something really, positive about Trump. He said basically Trump and I share attorneys. Joe Tacopino, who's representing Trump, also represented Meek Mills and helped Meek Mills get out of the trouble he was in. So, they find an affinity to him. I don't understand it because Donald Trump is a rich white dude who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, who doesn't know anything about the black experience and doesn't about even like black people. I don't understand how they find anything in common with this guy. I don't get that, okay? I don't get that. So that's a long answer to your question. I hope I did a decent job with it. You probably will do an even better job. Go ahead.
I mean, I think everything that you pointed out and highlighted is true, Dad, because my family member who, he liked Trump. It was for economic reasons. He was like, look, I know how he is. He probably is racist, but look, he's out there getting that money, and that's what I'm about too. So I think that resonates with a lot of black men. And the question is why? Why does that resonate? Now I do agree that you talked about your political leanings, Dad. I'm definitely not center right. I'm center left. I would say even liberal, but I have issues with both parties. I have issues with the Republican Party. I have issues with the Democrat Party. So in terms of, the Democrats, at least currently, I feel like not doing enough to keep us loyal to it like so many black women have. I agree with those on the right who say that. That's probably the only thing I agree with Candace Owens about in terms of, we should use our political block and not just always just give it to the Democrat Party. Even though I'm liberal and center left. So I think that the right is using that in black men, and black men feel that even more. And then again, like you were saying, the association between Donald Trump and hip hop. I was reading something. There's this famous guy who does a lot of stats, political stats. He runs a website called 538. He documented that between 1989 and 2014, that 19% of song or rap lyrics about Trump were negative, while 60% were positive. So the rappers, for decades, they were making pretty positive lyrics about Trump. And then around the 2010s, when there was more of a left-leaning political shift, that's when Donald Trump, that's when the lyrics became more negative. So there has been this long relationship between black men, between hip hop and Donald Trump. Trump is speaking positively of him just because of, like you said, this glamorous image that he puts out, this hustling image, even though he got a small loan of $1 million. But I think we we do need to have. I would love to have a panel with black men and black women to discuss these issues, because it's very complex. Because like I was saying before, black women, we tend to be religious, and we do hold some conservative values at times, but why are we so loyal to the Democratic Party? We had a comment, Dad, from, let me see if I can find it. I love the YouTube. Do you see the comments? But it was from 663 Observing Facts. He said you see it?
No, go ahead. There's another comment I want to address. Let me address that comment first, Chloe.
Okay.
It's a negative comment, and I want to address it, and then we'll go to the one that you're about to read, because that's where we're going to probably end, with the negative comments. I mean, with the positive comments, assuming that the comment you're about to read is a positive comment.
Well, it's a positive comment, yeah.
Okay, all right. So the one I'm about to read is not, and I want to really address this. As a 61-year-old African American from the South, I want to address this one. Okay. Clarissa, the cat lady. She says, only one watching here on YouTube as of writing this. Well, that's not what I see here, first and foremost. Laugh out loud. Then she goes on to say, you embarrassment to my race. I presume she's black. Democrat Party, white liberal, owned Negroes are some of the dumbest animals on the planet. Now, I'm making some assumptions. I'm assuming this is a black woman. Okay? I don't know. But I'm going to address what she says. Again, as a 61-year-old African-American man from the South, here's what I know as both an attorney and a minister. Here's what I know. I know that in 1619, African-Americans were brought here and shortly thereafterwards enslaved as chattel property and remained in that state for 240 years. In fact, this is the 160th year. Today, this year, 2023, is the 160th year of the ending of slavery. 240 years, black Americans were enslaved under a system so horrendous that we can't describe it. Who did that? Who enslaved us? It was the Democrat Party, Dixiecrats, Confederates, white supremacists who raped, who lynched, murdered, sold our families, molested, buck breaking, all sorts of unspeakable things. That was the Democrat Party, Dixiecrats. After slavery ended, for the next 100 years, well, before I even get there, following slavery, and before I go on, how does slavery come to an end? Because of white abolitionists, black abolitionists, who were members of the Republican Party. The Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, the party that worked to free slaves, although Lincoln was a racist himself. Okay? And under the Republican Party, blacks began to get elected into the Congress. Again, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments were passed. Things were looking up. Never got to 40 acres and a mule, but things nonetheless were looking a bit up. But the South worked out a deal and began to rise again. And so we went from Reconstruction to redemption. Still, the Democrats were the ones who were fighting blacks mostly. Started in the, we've been talking about Tennessee here for the past week or two. Out of the state of Tennessee came the KKK. Again, all Democrats. And then something began to happen in the early 20th century. Roosevelt implemented the war on poverty, the Great New Deal. And blacks began to shift out of the Republican Party and into the Democrat Party. And in response, many of the Dixiecrats who had enslaved blacks, who had tortured blacks, raped blacks, lynched blacks, they began to shift out of the Democrat Party with all these blacks coming into the Democrat Party now. They began to shift into the Republican Party. And then that went further when Barry Goldwater ran for the presidency. And Strom Thurmond also abandoned the Democrat Party and went to the Republican Party. So there was a great influx of those Dixiecrats and their descendants, the Confederates and their descendants, who left the Democrat Party and went over to the GOP, to the Republican Party. And that's where they've been ever since. So when you talk about Democrat, liberal, you're not talking to an ignorant person. I'm a licensed attorney. I studied this issue. I know the law. I know constitutional law. I know history. And take it from me, I know that the Republican Party today, not the Republican Party of the 19th century, but the Republican Party today is controlled by white supremacists, is controlled by MAGA, is controlled by whites who are fearful and angry and have grievances. And they're doing everything they can to try to continue the oppression of African Americans. And for any black person to level up with that crowd of people, that is the ignorant person. That's the ignorant person. Because you today, if you are a Republican, you are on the side of the Confederate, the very people who enslaved your ancestors. So get out of my face with that. I'm not the one. I'm not the one. I know American history. Take that somewhere else. Okay? Take that somewhere else. All right, Chloe.
They don't care about any of that, Dad. They don't care about the history. They don't care about the laws. And you know, that's what's infuriating for me as someone who grew up in the household that you just described, where we literally sat around the kitchen table every night discussing history. As someone who grew up in a household where, I read 20, 30 books a week, history books, graduated from law school and am a licensed attorney, studied these issues under parents who study these issues too. They don't care. And so the ignorant comments from Clarissa the cat lady, I mean, her name, well,
I was trying to be nice throughout this thing, but basically, let me use some phraseology that Malcolm X used. Those folks, black people who are part of the GOP, this Republican Party today, are house niggas.
Period.
Who, as Malcolm X described, said essentially, when the house of the slave master would catch on fire, the house nigga would say, "Master, we house on fire." When the slave master would get sick, the house nigga would say, "Master, we sick." What you're dealing with here, Clarissa, is no house nigga. And I speak on behalf of African Americans. We know who has our best interests and who don't. And it's definitely not the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, David Duke, Donald Trump, Giuliani, and so Mitch McConnell, who are doing everything they can to turn back black equality. What we have, what black equality we have.
But in the words of Candace Owens, I was listening. I watch her
Lord.
to see how the other side thinks and all of that. But there was a viral clip of her going around where she's saying, she doesn't want to be a part of this culture. This culture she finds, and I'm paraphrasing. If I could pull the actual clip up, I would. But she finds this culture, referring to African American culture, to be abhorrent, to be subservient.
Now, there is an ignorant person right there, Candace. So I think maybe the most ignorant black person in America, Clarissa Cat Lady. I guess that's your mentor. Go ahead, Chloe.
So this is the type of defiance you all are going to get at this channel, and the information that you're going to get. So there you go. That was an address to that comment. But I think that let's plan a panel to talk about the growing divide between black men, black women. We can focus on it politically. There's other divides in our communities on other type of like social issues, but I think politically it'll be interesting because it gets down to the nitty gritty about what's going on. And you know, the Bible says a house divided cannot stand, and that's what the powers that be have been trying to do within our community since we were brought over here. Divide the house.
Well, Chloe, let me just help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
It is very obvious where the GOP is today. Okay? It is very obvious. This party is the party of the former Dixiecrats, the people who actually enslaved. These are their descendants. Why would an African-American person, male or female, support that, knowing that the GOP, as former Confederates or descendants of the Confederate, are bent on eroding, even violently, black equality, are fearful of black progress? Why would a person join with that, seeing how blatant the GOP is right now? This is blatant.
Because I think they'd rather be with racist, white supremacist capitalists than to be, in their minds, on the side of people who encourage black victimhood. I've heard that a lot from black conservatives. But you have a victim mentality. You're just playing the race card. You know, we need to empower ourselves. So I think that they'd rather be on the side of, they recognize that the GOP and some of these right leaders are racist and white supremacists, but they'd rather be on that side because they falsely believe that black people play into victimhood and the victim mentality by lining up with the Democrats. I think a lot of it comes down to that as well.
Well, let's talk about that a second. Is it victimhood or victimology? I hear that a lot too. Is it victim? Let me ask this. When Frederick Douglass was fighting for the freedom of African Americans, was that victimhood?
No.
Or when Harriet Tubman was freeing slaves, was that victimhood? Would it had not been victimhood for her to say, okay, you know what, we're in slavery, let's do the best we can, sort of like Booker T. Washington. Let's do the best we can, because to speak out and to fight back, to resist, to protest, whatever, that's a victim mentality. That's illogical. I guarantee you white Americans would never do that.
Well, they don't do it. I mean, we see it with the Holocaust and with the Jewish community. You know, they're never accused of playing the victim card or having victim mentality. Even Native Americans, it's always the black community. Always the black community. And I think that and this is a critique that I have of our community, I think that until we become more self-sufficient and don't have to rely on either the right or the left, and we have our own economies and our own businesses, that will bridge the gap between this growing divide between right African Americans and left African Americans. Because if you're on the right, you're still subject to the white supremacy and a racist capitalistic society, the same as a person on the left. So I think we need to focus on being self-sufficient and providing for ourselves, being educated, etc.
Well, that's a great point. And we once were. We once had our own black economy. I advocate that, quite frankly, because we shouldn't be dependent upon another group of people for food, for clothes, for almost everything. That is absolutely true. And we know why we no longer have that economy, because so many black folks wanted to integrate. Dr. King, who fought for integration, said afterwards that he was uncertain because perhaps he has led his people into a burning house. Okay? So, having our own economy, you go, for example, to any city in America, Dallas, for example, go over to South Dallas, where blacks are, and where a large percentage of blacks, where sort of the black community sort of emerged in Dallas, and you can't find a black-owned grocery store, you can't find a black-owned hospital, very few black clothing stores. I mean, the most you will find are barbershops, a few washer and dryers, a whole bunch of churches, but no economic base. You're absolutely right. The thing is, we live in a country that's so racist that even when we built those kinds of strong economies, they would come and destroy them. Right?
Yeah.
Tulsa, Rosewood, Wilmington, North Carolina. We could go on and on and on. But that's not an excuse for us, I agree with you, to start, using the $1 trillion that we spend in this economy every year. Recirculate that money, which is why we are, as black business people, we have a black-owned law firm. We get a lot of calls from blacks. We appreciate every dollar that, blacks spend with our law firm. Many of them call us and say, we want a black lawyer. We want a black attorney. We appreciate that, and we try to return the favor and patronize black businesses ourselves. Because, as you said, there is a thing for having your own economy and for doing business with your folks and circulating money back into your community. You're absolutely right.
But
So-
I'd love to do a video on this black victimhood mentality that a lot of black conservatives throw out against those of us who speak about these issues. We're just playing into the cult of victimhood. I hear that all the time. So I like to do a deep dive. So I'm announcing it here today, Dad. This is unplanned, but I think we should definitely do a deep dive into this topic.
Okay, let's do it. Do it next week. I mean, let's delve into it. Victimhood. I did something like that in a message that I did for our church a few weeks ago, a few months ago now, where I talked about why black Americans, after 400 years, still don't have any wealth in this country. 400 years later, we went from zero wealth to about 3% ownership of wealth in this nation over 400 years. Why is that? Is that because of culture, or is that because of white supremacy? Go watch the videos and see for yourself what the facts show. What the facts show. Now, Chloe, one last thing before we get out of here. This is what I've been wanting to do. Here we go. This is one of these black men that we just had, Tim Scott. He announced his exploratory committee this past week, so he's looking to run for the presidency. I listened and watched his introductory video, and I found it deplorable. And I'm going to comment as he goes through that video. And that's going to end today's broadcast. Please stay around, you all, and listen to this, but this will end this broadcast. Thank you all. Thank you for your comments, even the negative ones. I forgot that lady's name, but come back next week, okay? Let's talk. Look, let's do it, all right? But here we go. Chloe, and so let's do this. I'm
Let's
just
go.
going to make some comments on Tim Scott's video. That didn't work right, but let's see if I can fix this. All right, let me do it another way. I don't know what just happened.
On this day, be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. America's soul was put to the test, and we prevailed. Today, on this day, April 12th, 1861, in this harbor, the first shots of the Civil War were fired, and our country faced the defining moment. Would we truly be one nation, under God?
So it's ironic that Tim Scott starts his video out talking about the Civil War. And it's true, as he said, the first shots of the Civil War were shot in South Carolina, where he's from, and where he is one of the senators. The irony is, though, today, as I explained earlier, he's on the side of the Confederates. This black man who is potentially running for the president today is on the side of the Confederates, those descendants of the Confederates who fought to keep us enslaved. That's the first thing I want to point out about his video. Let's keep going.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. America's soul was put to the test, and we prevailed. Today, our country is once again being tested. Once again, our divisions run deep, and the threat to our future is real. Joe Biden and the radical left have chosen a culture of grievance over greatness. They're promoting victimhood instead of personal responsibility, and they're indoctrinating our children to believe we live in an evil country.
That is all GOP talking points. Joe Biden and the leftists are indoctrinating our children. Okay, so that's what DeSantis and Greg Abbott says to implement laws and policies to keep CRT out of schools, so that children are not learning the true history of this nation. That victimhood, he used that word that we just talked about, victimhood, because everyone does not choose, black Americans don't choose to do what he's done, which is to be dependent upon on the GOP. Some of us stand up, speak out against white supremacy. And to label that victimhood is asinine, quite frankly. Okay? So basic GOP talking points are all that is coming from him. Now, he's having to do this. We understand why. Because, again, the GOP of today, that's what you got to do. You got to talk that stuff. You got to say that, because this GOP is radicalized. Trump radicalized this GOP. So this is a primary. If he gets in, it's going to be a primary. He's going to be running against the chief white supremacist, Donald Trump. So he has to show this GOP, no, I'm a black man, but I ain't really no black man. I'm really one of you all. I agree with you all. Okay? So let's keep going.
And all too often, when they get called out for their failures, they weaponize race to divide us, to hold on to their power. When I fought back against
That must be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard somebody say, that Black Americans weaponize race. Race has been so weaponized against us. It is, oh Lord. Wow. The stuff that we have endured because of our race, and he's going to say we are weaponizing race, Chloe, is some of this is just, it boggles the mind. It boggles the mind for a Black man to be saying this stuff.
Their liberal agenda, they called me a prop, a token, because I disrupt their narrative. I threaten their control. They know the truth of my life disproves their lies. See, I was raised by a single mother in poverty. The spoons in our apartment were plastic, not silver, but we had faith. We put in the work, and we had an unwavering belief that we too could live the American dream. I know America is a land of opportunity, not a land of oppression. I know it because I've lived it. That's why it pains my soul to see.
Did you hear that part?
Mm-hmm.
That America's a land of opportunity, not oppression? Did you hear him say that?
Mm-hmm.
America is a land of both oppression and opportunity. And the opportunity for African Americans have come about because of the work, the sacrifices of the people that he called victimologists. Was Martin Luther King playing the victim card when he gave his life to fight white supremacy? Was Medgar Evers playing the victim card when he got shot in the back? Was Emmett Till playing the victim card when he got lynched? This is ridiculous. And it's offensive for this Black man to be saying these things. But again, he's not talking to us. He's talking to white conservatives. He's talking to MAGA. He's talking to the GOP. You know what? I don't have to play any more of this. That's ridiculous. Just get ready to get out of here. Chloe? Yeah, it's been almost 2 hours, but I've enjoyed it.
Me too.
I've enjoyed
This has been a good conversation. A good conversation. What you're gonna get here is defiance, the truth, knowledge, and a lot of entertainment as well. So if you all enjoyed this conversation, come back to the next video. We have some good topics come into play. And remember, this is a channel focused on speaking about topics that affect the Black community. That's what we're about. We make it known all over. We welcome everyone, but we do focus on Black issues. So please, and leave your comments. We love having conversations, dialogues. We don't run from it. We work in the adversarial system as attorneys. We're used to it. We hope you all enjoyed this content. We will be back. Thank you for joining. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace. Love. Soul.
Hey.
Hey.
Ever since I was a child, I've always hated bullies. I was that child. If I saw another kid getting picked on in class or at the lockers, I would stand up for that kid. I couldn't stand seeing bullying. But there was one incident with a teacher that almost silenced me. It is my first clear memory of racism and discrimination. It's still so vivid and clear in my head. I remember one day we were in class one afternoon, and there was some school pep rally going on. My teacher decided to hand paint butterflies and flowers on our faces in anticipation of the school event. So we all went one by one up to her so that she could paint our face. I can't paint your face. because your skin is too dark. I was mortified, embarrassed, and deeply ashamed. In that moment, even though I wanted to say something, I couldn't get the words out. So I walked back to my desk, I sat down, and I stared blankly at my desk until the bell rang. When I got home from school that day, my parents knew something was wrong. But I remember being so reluctant to tell them. I really don't know why. When I finally did, obviously they were furious. And let's just say the next day at school was one to remember. But this incident taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me to always stand up against racism, discrimination, and injustice. It fortified my resolve to fight for the vulnerable and voiceless. Just like my clients' voices are taken when they are wrongfully accused of a crime, subjected to banking while black, fighting for custody of their children, or fighting for just compensation from stingy insurance companies. My name is Attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice. I am one half of Corbett & Corbett Law Firm and the Defiant Lawyers. We're here to fight for justice for the accused, the oppressed, the vulnerable, and the voiceless. You can find us in Dallas, Texas. Go to our website, www.corbettfirm.com. Improving lives and impacting laws.